What happens when the man who signs the checks ends up picking strawberries under the name Gary from Reno? Garrett Harlan had never worked a day in the fields. He'd grown up around them. His dad built the produce company from a single roadside stand into 6 full-scale farm locations across California. But when his father died 3 years ago and left the company in his hands, Garrett stepped into the office, not the dirt. He was good with logistics, supply chains, and numbers. But lately, the numbers weren't adding up. One location, the third farm near Fresno, kept coming up short in production. Not enough to scream theft, but enough to raise eyebrows. Turnover was high. There were whispers of workers quitting without warning. When Garrett asked for answers, the district manager gave him the same line every time: just a tough labor market. Garrett wasn't buying it anymore, so he came up with a plan. He grew out his beard, dyed it gray, and wore wraparound sunglasses. His usual tailored clothes were swapped for dusty jeans, a long-sleeve flannel, and a sun hat. He showed up with a fake ID and called himself Gary from Reno, saying he'd worked farms in Nevada and was just looking for a short-term gig. None of the field crews had ever met him, and the supervisor at this location, a guy named Reggie, had only seen his face once years ago at a corporate Christmas party. There was no reason anyone would suspect a thing. They were short on hands, so Gary was shoved into a crew by noon. "You work fast, you stay," Reggie said flatly. "You slow us down, you're gone." His eyes were hidden behind dark shades, voice dry as the dirt under their boots. The work was brutal. Hot sun, bent backs, fingers aching from plucking strawberries off thick vines. Garrett found himself paired with a small group of workers who spoke mostly Spanish, 3 men and 1 woman. Her name was Luzia, soft-spoken, maybe mid-30s. She showed him how to twist the fruit without bruising it and joked that he had city hands. "Don't worry," she smiled. "After a week, they'll feel like sandpaper." Garrett laughed, winded. "I hope I last a week." At lunch, they sat under a makeshift tarp. The others shared homemade tortillas and beans. Garrett had packed a banana and granola bar. He was about to offer to trade when Reggie stormed over, clipboard in hand. "Hey, Luzia," Reggie barked. She stood quickly, wiping her hands on her pants. "You clocked out late yesterday." "That's a fine," her eyes widened. "Only 5 minutes, the bus was, I don't care, you know the rules, $5. But I only make, do it again, and it'll be 10. He pointed at the others. "That goes for all of you. I catch anyone slacking, you're getting docked, don't like it. Go back to wherever you crawled out from." Garrett felt his stomach twist. No one spoke. Luzia quietly sat down and pulled her knees to her chest. Back at work, Garrett stayed quiet but watched everything. Reggie made rounds every half hour, yelling if someone stood up to stretch. He barked at a young man named Mateo for talking too much. "You get paid to pick, not to gossip." Later that day, Garrett overheard him say something that made his blood run cold. "I swear," Reggie muttered to another crew lead, "I should start charging him for water too. Maybe then they'll hustle." That night, Garrett sat in his motel room, hands raw, back throbbing. He thought about Luzia's face when Reggie found her, about the silence that followed. He hadn't expected to find this. Not like this. The next morning, Garrett was assigned to a different row. As he walked past the supply shed, he caught Reggie cornering one of the younger workers, Javi, maybe 18. "You missed Monday," Reggie was saying. "That's a $20 fine." "But I had my brother was in the hospital." "Not my problem. You want to keep working here, you pay up. And don't think about running to anyone. You're lucky I don't report you for fake papers." Javi's face went pale. Garrett stepped behind a stack of crates and clenched his fists. He couldn't blow his cover yet, but he was done just watching. By the end of Garrett's 3rd day in the fields, he had stopped trying to keep up with the others. Not because he didn't care, he cared more than he ever had, but because his body refused to move any faster. His hands were already blistered under his gloves, and his shoulders ached from bending over rows that felt endless. Every muscle in his back buzzed like a live wire, but the pain wasn't what got to him. It was the silence. The way the workers barely spoke above a whisper when anyone in a red vest walked past. The red vests were crew leads handpicked by Reggie, and they patrolled the rows like prison guards. Garrett had watched one of them, a man named Drew, walk up behind a girl who couldn't have been older than 16 and yank the crate from her hands just to check the weight. When she flinched, he laughed and told her she was lucky he didn't dock her for looking bored. Garrett didn't laugh. And he didn't forget. That afternoon, a supervisor from another facility named Dana arrived on site. She was there to drop off replacement irrigation hoses, but Garrett caught her eyeing the workers from the edge of the field. She didn't walk the rows or talk to any of them. She stood by her truck with her arms crossed and a clipboard tucked under one elbow. Reggie joined her after a few minutes, and the two of them disappeared into the office trailer near the gravel lot. After the next rest break, Garrett found Lucia crouched near the water jug, rubbing her wrist. Her eyes were glassy with fatigue. "You all right?" he asked, crouching next to her. She hesitated, then nodded. "Just sore." He looked at her wrist. It was already wrapped with a strip of cloth, but the swelling pushed against the fabric. "That doesn't look good." "It's been like this since last week," she said. "I asked to move to packaging for a few days, but Reggie said I'd lose hours." Garrett said nothing. He couldn't risk blowing his cover, not yet. But inside, something shifted. When the whistle blew, everyone stood again. Garrett helped Lucia up and headed back to his row. About an hour later, he heard shouting near the far edge of the field. A few workers paused and looked up, but no one moved. Garrett walked toward the noise. He saw Drew standing nose to nose with a man whose name he hadn't learned yet, a tall worker with a shaved head and a limp in his left leg. There was a broken crate on the ground between them, berries scattered across the dirt. "You dropped it, you clean it," Drew was saying. "That's a full bin." "You owe the weight." The man's jaw clenched. "I didn't drop it, that crate was cracked." "Doesn't matter, you picked it, you're responsible, that's company product, that's theft." Garrett stepped in before he could think twice. "Hold on," he said. "He said it was defective." "That's not theft." Drew turned slowly. "Who the hell are you?" "New guy, Gary." "This doesn't concern you, Gary. Back to your row." "I'm not going anywhere while you're threatening someone for something that isn't his fault." Drew took a step closer. "You want to be next." Garrett didn't flinch. "I want to know why you're accusing someone of stealing over spilled fruit." Reggie's voice cut through the air like a blade. "That's enough." He appeared from behind the shed with Dana beside him. She didn't say a word, just watched. Reggie walked between them and raised his voice. "You don't raise your voice to a supervisor on my site, period. You want to start something, Gary? You'll lose your spot faster than you got it." Garrett kept his eyes on him. "I'm not starting anything. I'm asking why your crew leads are treating people like they're disposable." Reggie's expression shifted. "You don't get to ask questions. You're a picker. You're replaceable." Dana finally spoke. "Reggie, let's talk inside." He glared at Garrett, then followed her back toward the trailer. The man with the limp gave Garrett a nod of thanks before returning to his row. Garrett stood there for a moment, breathing hard. He could hear his heart pounding in his ears. Later, while stacking crates near the loading dock, Garrett caught a break in the routine. The driver of the delivery truck, an older guy named Len, leaned over while marking inventory on his clipboard. "You're the one who stepped in with Drew earlier, right?" he said under his breath. Garrett nodded. Len glanced around. "Watch your back. Reggie's been on edge lately." Couple weeks ago, a guy from Bakersfield asked HR about hours being cut. Next day, his contract was lost. Never saw him again. HR let that slide. "You think HR comes out here?" Len snorted. "Only person who visits is Dana, and she's not here to help. She's here to keep things quiet." Garrett looked toward the trailer. "Quiet from who?" "Corporate. People like you." The irony nearly knocked the wind out of him. That evening, Garrett waited until the sun dipped low enough to cast long shadows across the rows. The workers filed out and boarded the shuttle bus's old, unmarked vehicles that rattled as they pulled away. Garrett stayed behind, pretending to finish up in the tool shed. Once the lot emptied, he walked to the trailer. He knocked once and opened the door without waiting. Dana was inside, sitting at the desk with her phone open. She looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" Garrett stepped in and shut the door. "Yeah, I think it's time we talked," she leaned back. "You're not supposed to be in here." "I know who you are, Dana." "And I know who you report to." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me," he pulled off the hat, then the sunglasses. The beard stayed, but the posture changed. He stood taller. "I'm Garrett Harlan. I own this company." Dana's face drained of color. He held up a hand before she could speak. "Don't waste your breath, I've seen enough." She opened her mouth, closed it. "What I want," Garrett continued, "is an explanation for the fines, for the threats, for the way Reggie runs this place like he's untouchable." Dana swallowed. "This site's labor costs have been under pressure. We've had to tighten compliance. Some of the workers take advantage, and you think threatening a teenage girl over crate weight is compliance?" She hesitated. He stepped closer. "I heard what Reggie said to Javi. I saw Drew intimidate a man over cracked plastic. I watched Luzia work through a wrist injury because she was afraid of losing hours. And you stand by and do nothing." Dana's voice was barely a whisper now. "This isn't what we wanted, but it's what you allowed." He pointed toward the dusty window behind her. "I built this company with my father. We promised ourselves we'd never be the kind of place that chewed people up. And now I find out we're docking wages over 5 minutes and threatening to report people for their immigration status." Dana said nothing. "You're done here," he said. "Call Reggie. Tell him to pack his things. He's finished too." Her mouth fell open. "You're terminating both of us." "No," Garrett said. "I'm removing you. You don't get to call it termination. That implies you had a future here." She stood slowly, still stunned. "Leave your badge and keys on the desk," he said. "Security will be here in 20 minutes. She stared at him for a long moment, then opened the drawer, dropped her key ring, and walked out. No defense. No protest. Garrett sat in the chair she left behind. The room was silent except for the hum of the old air conditioner. He looked around photos of tractors, a wall calendar with fake inspirational quotes, a white board with production targets written in fading red marker. He picked up the phone. "Get me HR," he said. "We're about to clean house." The sun hadn't yet risen when Garrett returned to the Fresno farm the next morning, this time in clean jeans and a company-branded windbreaker. His beard and disguise were gone. His name badge read Garrett Harlan, owner. He didn't wait for a company memo or a formal HR announcement. People didn't need a press release. They needed to see someone in charge was actually standing in the mud with them. The first shuttle bus hadn't arrived yet, but a few early workers were already milling around the lot. Garrett stood near the old tool shed, watching them trickle in. Most avoided eye contact. A few glanced at his badge, then looked away. Word had spread overnight, but no one seemed sure what to expect. Luzia stepped off the second bus, her wrist now braced with cloth and medical tape. Garrett nodded once. She gave a cautious nod back. Drew arrived 10 minutes later, striding through the gravel lot like nothing had changed. His red crew vest was zipped to the collar. He scanned the field, clearly expecting to start his usual rounds. When his eyes landed on Garrett, he stopped. "You're not supposed to be out here," Drew said, approaching with a practiced scowl. "This is crew staging." "No visitors." "I'm not visiting," Garrett said calmly. "I'm working, and you're done." Drew tilted his head. "What? You're fired, effective immediately." "What the hell are you talking about?" Garrett didn't raise his voice. "You threatened workers, you intimidated minors. You enforced fake fines, and you operated under the assumption that no one was watching." Drew turned to a few workers nearby as if expecting them to back him up. No one moved. "You can't fire me," he said, laughing nervously. "I've been here for 8 years. Reggie said I was cleared to discipline however I saw fit." "Reggie doesn't work here anymore," Garrett said, "and neither do you." He gestured toward the office trailer. 2 security staff called in from headquarters stood just outside the entrance. One of them held a clipboard. "You can collect your belongings and hand in your vest on the way out." Drew took a step forward. You're making a mistake. You don't know how things run out here. I do now, Garrett said. And that's why you're leaving. Drew stood frozen for a long second, then stormed off toward the trailer without another word. Garrett turned to the nearby workers. Crew assignments will be delayed this morning. Everyone gets 30 minutes paid to meet under the canopy behind the shed. We're going to talk. No managers, no supervisors, just you and me. Some looked confused, others hesitated, but they followed. By the time the group gathered, about 30 workers stood quietly under the tattered canopy. Garrett climbed onto a plastic crate so they could see him. I won't waste your time, he said. Some of you already know who I am. For those who don't, I'm Garrett Harlan. My name's on the side of the trucks, but recently that stopped meaning anything. I let people I trusted run this place, and I didn't check what kind of leadership they were actually providing. He looked around the group. The air was still. No one interrupted. I went undercover this past week because I didn't believe the reports I was getting. I thought maybe the numbers were just off. What I found was worse. I saw threats. I saw injuries ignored. I saw people fined for things no one should be fined for. A man near the front spoke up. So what are you going to do now? Garrett nodded. First, we're scrapping every internal fine system on this site. From this moment forward, no one here will be docked wages for tardiness, broken crates, or any reason that hasn't gone through formal HR procedure. Second, I've brought in a neutral third-party labor consultant to evaluate this facility. They'll be here all week, talking directly with you. You can speak anonymously, and your job won't be affected for telling the truth. Whispers moved through the crowd. I'm also setting up a field rotation, he continued. No one will work more than 5 consecutive days without a mandatory rest day, no exceptions. We're hiring more staff to make that possible, even if it costs more. A woman in the back raised her hand. What happens to the people who covered for Reggie and Drew? Garrett looked at her directly. Anyone who ignored abuse or enforced fake penalties won't be staying. We're reviewing every supervisor's record. If you've got names or stories, now's your chance to speak up. I'll listen. Personally, he stepped down from the crate. If you don't feel safe coming to me, you can give your statement to HR or the consultant. No retaliation is allowed. If anyone threatens you for speaking, they'll be gone. No one clapped. That wasn't the kind of place this was. But people didn't walk away either. Garrett saw cautious hope in a few faces, not trust yet, something smaller, like the first break in a storm. After the meeting, Garrett walked the rows with a clipboard of his own, not to count crates, to count people. He wanted to know who was missing from the morning crew. Javi wasn't there. He found Luzia near the far corner of the field, her wrist still braced, her head down as she picked. Luzia, he said quietly. Do you know where Javi is? She looked up. He didn't come back on the bus last night. Did he say anything? She hesitated, then nodded. After you confronted Drew, Javi said he thought he was next. He said he couldn't risk being reported. His brother was already deported last year. Garrett's stomach tightened. Do you know how to reach him? She shook her head. He doesn't have a phone. He stays in a trailer out near the edge of town, the blue one behind that old gas station. Garrett didn't wait. He handed his clipboard to a nearby crew lead and walked off the field, shoes grinding in the dirt. He drove himself. No driver, no assistant. Just him following Luzia's directions through side roads until he reached a rundown trailer park behind a boarded-up gas station. The blue trailer sat near the back, its windows covered with blankets. He knocked twice. No answer. Javi, he said. It's Garrett, from the farm. Silence. I'm not here to punish you. I'm not here to report anything. I'm here because I didn't do my job and people like you paid for it. That ends now. A few seconds passed. Then the door cracked open. Javi peered out. His eyes were bloodshot. His voice was hoarse. Why are you really here? Garrett kept his hands at his sides. To ask you to come back, under new terms, with protection. You should never have had to run to feel safe. Javi opened the door farther but didn't step out. What changed? I did. They stood in silence for a beat, the wind rattling the loose siding of a nearby trailer. I'll think about it, Javi said. Take your time. Garrett replied. "If you want a ride, I'll wait." Javi didn't answer, but he didn't shut the door either. Garrett walked back to his truck and sat behind the wheel, engine off, watching the quiet street. He didn't leave for another 20 minutes. Back at the farm, a temporary operations lead named Michelle had arrived from headquarters. She was already reviewing files in the trailer office when Garrett returned. 3 more crew leads had complaints filed today, she told him. One of them used to run Reggie's payroll entries. "Fire them," Garrett said, "and run an audit on every paycheck processed in the last 6 months. If anyone was shorted, I want it corrected and repaid by Friday." Michelle nodded. "What do you want me to do about housing? We've got workers living in trailers like Javi's. Some don't have steady utilities." "Start looking into temporary housing stipends," Garrett said. "If we can't build housing, we can at least help them afford better places to stay." Garrett stepped back outside. The sun was high now and the fields buzzed with movement, but the energy felt different. Eyes weren't downcast. People moved with a little less tension in their shoulders. He spotted Lucia walking toward the water station. A younger woman walked beside her now, maybe new. Lucia was showing her how to position the crate, her voice steady and clear. Garrett didn't interrupt, he just watched, not because he was checking up on them, but because, for the first time in a long time, he trusted what he saw. The following week brought gray skies, and the first cool wind of the season sweeping across the Fresno fields a brief relief from the unrelenting heat that had hung over the farm for months. Garrett stood just outside the office trailer, watching crews organize into smaller units, each led now by a different face. None of the former leads remained. The last of them had been escorted off the premises 2 days earlier after the HR audit confirmed forged time entries and altered production weights. Garrett turned from the window as Michelle entered, holding a printed report with red tabs sticking out from the edges. "We finished the wage restitution review for this site," she said. "It's worse than we expected. Over 70 workers underpaid over the last 4 months. Some of them by more than $400. He took the report without sitting. "Initiate repayments immediately, no delays, no conditions. We've already started processing the transfers for anyone with direct deposit. For the others, we'll be distributing checks in person tomorrow." "Good." "And the housing stipend program? We've got a pilot ready. $200 a month per qualifying worker starting next pay cycle. It's not much, but it's a start." Garrett nodded slowly. "I want us to look into partnering with local housing nonprofits. We're not going to fix this overnight, but we're not going to ignore it either." He stepped out as the last few crews made their way toward the fields. He crossed the gravel lot toward the supply shed, where Lucia was helping distribute gloves and baskets. She moved with a slight hitch in her step, favoring her left leg, but her wrist was now properly braced and covered with a clean wrap. "Morning," Garrett said. She looked up, brushing dust from her sleeve. "Morning. I heard you've been helping train the new hires." She gave a small nod. "They needed someone who speaks both languages. It's easier when they're not guessing what to do all day." "I'd like to offer you a formal role," Garrett said. "Training lead, you'll still be out here but with a lighter load and higher pay. Plus, access to medical leave if your wrist needs time." Lucia didn't answer right away. She folded her arms, watching the workers file past them. "Why me?" "Because you already do the job, and people listen when you speak." Her eyes stayed on the fields. "I'll think about it." "Take your time," Garrett said. "But the offer's real, and so is the support." She gave a faint nod and returned to organizing supplies. Garrett continued down the path that ran parallel to the main picking rows. He stopped near the east edge of the field, where a group of new hires were being shown how to sort berries by grade. One of the trainers, a man named Jose who had transferred in from the Watsonville site, waved Garrett over. "We've got a problem with crate stock," Jose said. "Some of the bins are warped. If they're packed too tight, the bottoms collapse." Garrett crouched beside one of the damaged crates. It had clearly been reused past its service life. He ran his fingers along the cracked edge. "Pull every one that looks like this." We'll eat the cost. Jose raised an eyebrow. You sure? If it costs us a few thousand to avoid another injury or another accusation of theft, yeah, I'm sure. As Garrett stood and turned to leave, he spotted a familiar figure standing quietly near the edge of the irrigation trench. Javi. He was holding a clipboard, dressed in a clean company vest, not red like the old crew leads, but navy blue, the standard for quality control assistants. He hadn't made a big return, no announcement. Just showed up 2 days earlier with a folded envelope containing a signed rehire form. Garrett approached slowly. Glad to see you back, he said. Javi nodded. Michelle said I'd be helping verify shipments. It's better. Different pace. You need anything, you let me know. Javi paused, then asked, what happens when you leave? Garrett didn't pretend not to understand the question. I'm not leaving, I'm restructuring. The farms will each have an oversight coordinator, someone who reports directly to me. Not a district manager, not an operations rep. Someone whose job is to walk the rows regularly and talk to workers. That position will rotate every year. No one gets too comfortable. Javi looked down at the clipboard. That'll help. It'll only help if people like you keep speaking up. I didn't see what was happening because I didn't want to admit how out of touch I'd become. He didn't wait for a reply. He just squeezed Javi's shoulder once and walked back toward the trailer. Inside, Michelle had just hung up the phone. Legal wants to know how public we're going with this, she said. They're worried about lawsuits if we admit fault. Garrett sat down. We were at fault. If they're afraid of lawsuits, they should be more afraid of doing nothing. She nodded. So we're going public, a statement to the press. No spin, we acknowledge what happened, we outline what changed, and we invite third-party verification. Let the public see the books, the audits, the reforms. If we're going to claim we're different, we have to prove it. Michelle hesitated. You'll take heat for that. I deserve to. The next morning, Garrett stood under a pop-up tent near the front gate of the Fresno farm, a folding table set with envelopes bearing names in careful handwriting. Workers approached one by one, some hesitant, others curious. Each envelope contained a check back, wages calculated to the dollar, plus a printed breakdown of the hours, rates, and deductions. No speeches, no banners, just restitution quietly delivered. One woman unfolded her check, eyes scanning the amount. She looked up at Garrett, holding it with both hands. I didn't think anyone would ever care, she said. I didn't either, he admitted. Nearby, Luzia watched from the shade, still undecided about the new role. But she stood straighter now, posture relaxed, a quiet authority in her stance that hadn't been there before. Garrett didn't speak to the press that day. He didn't do interviews or pose for photos. He spent the afternoon reviewing new equipment orders, checking the irrigation schedule and walking the field with Jose to inspect crate inventory. By week's end, turnover had slowed. Complaints had dropped. And when a surprise inspection team from the Department of Labor arrived unannounced, they found clean logs, properly filled out time cards, and no evidence of coercion or wage theft. The inspector, a woman with sharp eyes and a federal badge, nodded once as she handed Garrett a copy of the preliminary report. You're not perfect, she said, but you're trying. That's more than I can say for a lot of your competitors. Garrett folded the report. Trying isn't good enough. We'll get it right. As the sun dipped behind the far hills, casting long shadows over the tilled earth, Garrett stood alone near the edge of the rows. The workers were loading up, the buses rumbling to life, the fields slowly falling quiet. He didn't feel proud. He felt responsible. He had missed what mattered. And now, piece by piece, he was putting it back together, not with promises, but with change.